Underrated players in sports has always existed, and in hockey's case, it can be especially prevalent because hockey is considered to be one of the most team-oriented major league sports in all of North America. And because of this, it can be pretty easy to accidentally overlook talent. And of course, there are many other factors that can contribute to being underrated, including the location of the team you play, the player's individual playing style, sheer luck, or even perhaps bad luck, and just many other variables. On this graph, we're going to take a look at NHL attendance, which definitely plays a large factor into players being underrated because obviously a bigger market is going to have more exposure, and that will definitely contribute, if your market's smaller, to being underrated. In the 2018-2019 season, the worst attended team was the New York Islanders with an average attendance of 12,442. Now do keep in mind, this doesn't take into consideration the size of the building, but this definitely will still have a strong correlation to exposure. The next team is the Florida Panthers with 13,261, so definitely a pretty decent jump there. And the third worst attended team is the Arizona Coyotes with 13,989. And so now, if you contrast the bottom team's attendance with a top team, you can truly understand the impact a market can have on the exposure of these players. As the Chicago Blackhawks actually had 21,415 average attendance, which is nearly 9,000 more in attendance than the New York Islanders. And again, this attendance number definitely has a strong correlation to the total number of fans that a given team has. And there definitely is many other factors in terms of underrating a player. Perhaps, the player lives in the shadows of another superstar on their team, and so they might not get the proper appreciation and valuation. So in today's video, we're going to go over some of the most shockingly underrated players in the entire NHL. And on a side note, I do take in consideration multiple seasons, so not just like a single breakout season necessarily makes someone underrated, so do keep that in mind. So comment down below the most underrated player that you can think of, and guys, make sure that subscribe button for some more awesome hockey content. We will start with the most cliche name that could ever appear on an underrated list. Barkov at this point has been declared the most underrated player so many times, to the extent that personally I don't really feel like he's underrated anymore. But I feel like also this list just wouldn't be right without him. And so Barkov was originally the second overall pick from the 2013 NHL draft, so the Nathan MacKinnon draft. And he was extremely underrated even coming into this draft year. As Barkov was a monster in Liga, producing at a crazy rate, he had a terrific World Juniors, yet people were pretty shocked when he went number 2, which again goes to show this would just be the start of Barkov's just underrated career. And in the first couple seasons, Barkov would develop well. However, in 2016, he really did explode, where he put up just nearly a point per game, and yet, no one really noticed. And the next season was more the same. He did fight with some injuries, but offensively, he was shining through, and defensively, he was developing very well. And the next season, Barkov would tally 78 points, which is definitely just fantastic, but again, he wasn't really getting that appreciation, and since his breakout season, Barkov would continue to put up better and better production. 96 points last year, and Barkov is yet again on track for another amazing season on a pretty odd, I would say odd, offensively sporadic Florida Panthers team. And this leads me to the next player on this list, Jonathan Huberdeau, who in my opinion is more underrated than Barkov at this point. Huberdeau, who is also a high-end draft pick, actually went 3rd overall in 2011. And since then, Huberdeau has slowly been developing into a superstar. And when I say slow, I kind of mean it. Because he's always been that highly skilled player who could produce some decent production, but basically every season we were seeing some positive, just incremental production. In 2018, he broke out putting up a career-high 69 points. The next season, he had a terrific season putting up 92, and this season, Huberdeau is on pace for over 100 points. So yet again, another fantastic season, and yet he isn't getting that much attention. In fact, I remember hearing people say that his production was kind of a fluke last season, or perhaps he was just getting carried, but that just obviously isn't the case whatsoever. And alongside of Barkov, Huberdeau's underrating definitely has a correlation to the fact that they play in one of the lowest attended arenas in Florida, but if they do keep playing like this, it will be impossible not to notice. Next, we have the freak of nature in Blake Wheeler. 6'5", terrific skater, and he has been an absolute monster in Winnipeg. And Wheeler definitely has had a very slow but steady development curve, which honestly feels like a common theme with the underrating of a player, as people don't really react so much to steady progression. Rather, people like to see that, that instant spotlight where players are instantly producing right off the bat. And Blake Wheeler, who was traded to Atlanta right before the move to Winnipeg, had a prolific boost to his game, as he went from being a 30-point player to being in a new environment to instantly becoming a 65-70 point player in such a short amount of time. And since 2016, Wheeler has been a massive producer as he's recorded 5 straight nearly point per game seasons with back-to-back 91-point seasons, and Wheeler is truly someone who is underappreciated in the NHL, as he's been a force for quite some time, and I do feel like perhaps, not enough people are really talking about Wheeler. Next, we have Nicklas Backstrom, and Backstrom definitely has a very interesting case. Because in reality, he's been one of the top centers in the NHL for basically the entirety of his career. But Backstrom's also a player that lives in the shadows of who else but Alex Ovechkin, who's really cementing himself to be arguably the best pure goal scorer in NHL history. So it does make sense why he does get overshadowed, but Backstrom himself has been a force his entire career. He consistently puts up fantastic production, always being around that point per game mark. He's defensively responsible and again, has been extremely consistent throughout his entire career, and arguably more consistent than Ovechkin, and hasn't missed any significant amount of games in 9 straight seasons. Next, we have Viktor Arvidsson, and Arvidsson, in my opinion, is probably the most underrated player on this list. In fact, he's so underrated on the majority of underrated top lists, he isn't even rated on the top underrated players. But Viktor is a hard-nosed goal-scoring winger who also has a tremendous value contract. And what most people don't realize is Arvidsson had 34 goals in 58 games last season, meaning that Arvidsson was nearly on pace for 50 goals before he got injured, and that is something that no one is really talking about. Now I will say though, Arvidsson has been struggling this season as he does battle with injuries, but before this season, he was a 30-goal scorer for 3 straight seasons, and in terms of an explanation on why he's underrated, I'm kind of having a hard time finding one, as he's always led his team in goals for those 3 seasons, and so it's not necessarily like he's being overshadowed, and Nashville is definitely a great market. Next, we have a very controversial figure in the NHL, Brad Marchand, and some of you may be thinking, how is Brad Marchand underrated? Well, I truly do believe he is, and this is highly attributed to the fact that 99% of the NHL fans just despise Marchand, and so many people tend to downplay just how good Marchand truly is. Because whether you like it or not, Marchand is a top player in the entire NHL, and he's a player that any single team would die to have. He's gritty, oftentimes crosses the line, probably most of the time, but he's tremendous offensive upside. Because since 2016, Marchand has been producing at just over a point per game, is on pace for back-to-back 100-point seasons, and on top of all this, Marchand has a very sound defensive game that is also backed up by very good advanced stats. And Marchand, given his size, honestly just defies all the laws of physics with the way he plays, but again, when you take into consideration how the majority of the NHL fan base just tends to downplay his game, he's actually pretty underrated when you take all the factors into consideration. Next, we have John Klingberg, and Klingberg is an exceptional offensive defenseman. Originally a 5th round pick in 2010, John had a long development path in Europe, where he slowly but surely developed into an ideal puck-moving defenseman. In fact, when he did break into the league, he had 40 points in his first 65 games, which is obviously just extremely impressive from that young offensive defenseman. And since breaking the league, Klingberg has consistently been among the top defensive scorers in the whole NHL. And he may not be the most defensively sound defenseman, but he has been putting up, above average defensive stats. And to add to Klingberg's story, in 2018 he had a career-high 67 points, which actually tied him for 2nd in the entire NHL in defensive scoring and only 1 point behind first place. And this season, Victor Hedman would actually take home his first Norris Trophy, and Klingberg would finish 6th in voting. But the thing is, Klingberg this season had better offensive production than Hedman. In fact, he had 2nd best in the NHL. And not just offense though, he had just as good of defensive advanced stats. Now, of course, there are more factors to this, but not very often do you hear Klingberg's name in Norris discussion. Next, we have JT Miller. And Miller has always been that hard-nosed player who's always had, just pretty respectable production. Even when you do consider that during his first, 5 seasons in the NHL, he had pretty low amount of ice time and perhaps was kind of underutilized at times. And JT Miller was actually shipped to Tampa in that blockbuster deal that of course sent Ryan McDonough to the Tampa Bay Lightning. And at this time, Miller was kind of just entering his prime, however, he was being shoved down a stacked Tampa Bay roster. However, again, Miller has always been that really good, gritty player with really good offensive upside. And since his transition into Vancouver, JT Miller in that young environment who's taking on a much bigger role, playing more minutes, has just exploded in his development. 56 points in 57 games, so just under a point per game. Miller hits, he battles hard in the corners, he fights, and again, he's having his best defensive season in his entire career. And a lot of people like to bash on Vancouver for trading away that 1st round pick, and many people are kind of labeling JT Miller as kind of a fringe top 6 player, and that is very far from the truth, as Miller has been probably, arguably, Vancouver's just most valuable player this season, as he plays that very consistent two-way game, and it's definitely been paying off for the Vancouver Canucks. Next, we have Sean Couturier, and Sean Couturier is another example of just the epitome of being underrated. Originally the 8th overall pick from 2011, he was renowned for his two-way game from the very beginning. And throughout Couturier's just entire career, he has slowly but surely developed into that elite two-way centerman, who's really just exploded in his offensive production, as he went from being a consistent 50-point player with a decent defensive game to being a point-per-game centerman with one of the top defensive games in the entire NHL. Back-to-back 76-point seasons, he's a top Selke candidate, and this season Sean is on pace for his best defensive year yet, alongside of yet again another very impressive, offensively productive year. And Couturier as a player also does not rely on any of the teammates. He makes everyone around him better, and is someone who's definitely just underappreciated and is definitely just very underrated in today's game. Next, we have Anders Lee, and Anders Lee has always gone under the radar for his elite goal scoring ability. Because ever since his entry into the league, he's actually been a very impressive goal scorer, where he actually put up 25 goals in his rookie season. And Lee has always been that very consistent high-end goal scorer. He did regress his next season after his rookie campaign, where he only put up 15 goals, but the next season he exploded, putting up 34, and then drastically improved the next season, putting up 40 goals. And Lee has definitely proved himself to be that elite goal scorer, and is definitely someone who doesn't really get acknowledged enough, and is definitely underrated. And lastly, we have Antoine Duclair. Duclair is really just a success story to this game. Standing in at only 5'11", Duclair is truly an outlier in today's, I guess, modern day NHL game, where every goalie is just a monster, especially when you do compare him to his goaltending tandem partner in Bishop, who stands at a whopping 6'7". And with that being said, Duclair in the past couple seasons has really just been living in the shadows of Bishop, as he plays that backup role to Ben Bishop, but has been nearly, if not equally, as impressive. Because the past 3 seasons, Duclair has really just been a rockin' net. And Duclair really just elevated his game last season, where he actually posted a .923 save percentage, and this season yet again he has made drastic improvements, as he's on pace for his best season yet. As he currently stands with a .927 save percentage and a 2.32 goals against average, which is just extremely impressive for someone who's considered a backup goaltender. And these numbers are among the top goaltenders in the entire NHL, and Duclair definitely just does not get enough recognition. He's small, he's feisty, and he's been extremely impressive. Anyways guys, thank you guys so much for watching. Again, this isn't a comprehensive list. If you do feel like I missed someone, definitely comment down below. And on top of that, who do you believe is the most underrated player currently in the NHL? Comment down below. Anyways guys, thank you guys so much for watching. The support has just been amazing, guys. I appreciate it so much. The RTH channel is closing in on 7,000 subscribers. That's just insane. I think my goal for all of 2020, well, it was to hit 5,000 subscribers. We did that in 28 days, and we're closing in on 7,000 subscribers, and it's only February 11th. Just crazy. And so my goal for all of 2020 now is 15,000 subscribers again, guys. So if you can't subscribe, I appreciate it so much. Obviously, guys, I've been having many 17-hour work days. I've been putting in a lot of work. I'm pursuing my career in marketing. You know, I'm a full-time student, but your guys' support has been making this process so much easier. Anyways, guys, thank you guys so much for watching. The support has been amazing. See you guys later.